So when you first go on your all-in extreme hunger journey, it feels both exhilarating and exciting. At least it did for me, because this was the first time I'd ever allowed myself full permission to eat whatever I wanted. On the other hand, it can also come along with a lot of fear, anxieties around health, weight gain, of course. It also feels super counterintuitive, because the first time, again, you are giving yourself full permission to eat whatever you want, coming from a whole background of extreme restrictive dieting. And I know for me that there was a big deep fear around eating too much sugar, what all these worries and concerns around sugar is super addictive. I was also really concerned about physical health. What if I became addicted to sugar? And really, this wasn't good for my health. Just allowing myself full permission to just eat whatever I wanted seemed and felt very kind of confusing, and there was so much noise online at the time. And if you are new around here, my name's Hetty. I'm a personal trainer and women's food freedom confidence coach. I actually experienced extreme hunger and struggled with my relationship with food for many years. And I chose to go all in to heal my relationship with food and fully get to a place of balance with my relationship with food. And since then, I've been able to heal my relationship with food and get to a point where I just feel calm, healthy, balanced, and happy with food, and food no longer takes complete control over my life. So honestly, I know firsthand how confusing this can feel, especially if you are going all in. Chances are you do actually care about your physical health, and you care about how you feel in your body and your relationship with food. And I know for me, and I spoke about this in my previous video, but we need to get clear on why we're doing this first and foremost. And I was going all in because I wanted to get to a point where food no longer lived rent-free in my mind. But with that also, at the time of going through my all-in journey, it felt almost like that, because all I was doing was thinking about the food that I was going to eat and planning what food I was going to eat. In this video, I really wanted to just break down my personal opinion on this, what I kind of learned through going through my own all-in journey, and also with the clients that I've worked with that have also healed their relationship with food, and maybe some common themes that you might notice with yourself, and maybe things that you might want to consider when you're going all in yourself or working on your relationship with food. There's a lot of noise online, and even more so now compared to when I was going on my all-in journey. And there's also a lot of comparison around what people eat on their all-in journey. This gives us kind of a perception of what we think it should look like, which, if you haven't watched my previous video talking about this, I will link it below. But essentially we do a lot of comparison, and we compare ourselves to what other people are eating. But I think fundamentally we first need to understand the reason of why we're going through the all-in process and what it actually entails and what it actually means. Because I know for me, I think I just reached a point where I'd got so sick and tired of following rules around food. My all-in process was a little bit chaotic and threw out the rule book altogether. And although I still had these fears around food and fearing weight gain and fearing of just eating non-stop, I think I just reached that point where I was like, screw this, I am just gonna literally eat whatever I want, and I can't be bothered anymore. I didn't necessarily follow particular rules or structure because I was so done with the rules, in all honesty. I'm not saying that one way is better or worse, but I'm just want to lay out what I learned through going through my personal experience and how that kind of evolved and unfolded for me, and maybe some little tips and tricks of what you might want to do when you're going through your all-in process and journey. And that's exactly what I'm going to break down in this video, how you can get to a point where food noise just completely shuts down, and you do heal your relationship with food, where you get to a point of balance and food freedom without feeling super addicted to sugar and feeling like you're just living off processed foods and feeling quite chaotic and maybe a little bit unhealthy as well, and get into that place where food does become normal again and food does become a balanced part of your lifestyle without just feeling solely relying on things like sugar. What we first need to do is understand the reason of why we're actually going all in or giving ourselves full permission to eat. And the reason for this, and I will link my video if you've not watched that, where I talk about extreme hunger and what it actually is and what it means for our body and why it's asking for food. I will link it below, definitely check that out. Essentially, when we're going like all in or we're going through this recovery process, essentially our body is calling out for food. It has been through a period of time where it's been severely restricted around food, calories and things like that. We need to take it through a process of actually feeding our bodies again. Like I said in that other video, there comes a point where our bodies start calling out for food and it gets more and more extreme, i.e. extreme hunger. So the point of going through the all-in process and feeding our bodies properly is just that. We need to start feeding our bodies again, which means that we need to start eating when we feel hungry, rather than previously we've probably suppressed our appetite, we've probably skipped meals or just tried to cut down on foods that we've eaten, whereas now we're giving ourselves full permission. It does feel scary. However, the thing that I did when I went all in, I just truly went balls to the wall and just ate whatever I wanted, and I had so many cravings for different types of foods. I had so many lists of foods that I'd been dying to eat for years, and I'd always told myself I wasn't allowed it. So along with all of the cravings and feeling hungry generally, I also had all of these cravings for certain types of foods, particularly things like chocolate and sugar and cakes and things like that, which for most people, when you are going through extreme hunger, you are going to have all of these sensations. You're going to feel physically hungry and mentally hungry, as in you're going to be thinking a lot about food still, and also you're still going to be craving things like chocolate and sugar and things like that. And the problem that I personally did was I just fully allowed myself full permission, which for me, what I did and what I chose to do at the time was I just had no plan. I just fully just gave up dieting. I would just eat whatever I wanted. I would eat as much chocolate, sugar, all of those old trigger foods that I used to have. And yeah, I just decided to just eat whenever I wanted. So the problem with that for me was I felt like I was always eating, because that mental energy and cravings for food was just constant at one point, especially in the beginning of the all-in journey for me. And not only that, but I felt like I was always going out and buying foods. I felt like I was spending a lot of money on foods, because in my mind I was like, well, I need to get over my fear of chocolate, I need to get over my fear of cookies and things like that. So I was actually creating a long list of certain types of foods to go out and buy, and I thought that in my head I just needed to eat all of those enough until the cravings went down. For me, if I could go back, I probably would have done things a little bit differently, because like I said, I felt like I was always eating, and I felt like hunger never seemed to feel satiated, and this was part of the reason, because I was eating foods that were not satiating my body. Obviously, we understand that we're going through the all-in process to heal our relationship with food so that the extreme hunger cravings start to die down. How I truly think now, and looking back on my own journey, if I'd have followed more of a structure, allowed myself full permission to eat, but so following a structure of 3 meals every single day along with snacks in between those meals, more so kind of keep it based upon that, and making sure that those 3 meals each day were really filling and satisfying and providing me with good balance of macronutrients. When I say macronutrients, I mean protein, carbs and fats. I think this is where sometimes be a little bit confusing, because like I said, for me personally, I'd been dieting for so many years that I was so done with just thinking about the nutrition of things. I just truly wanted to just switch off from it, so I kind of just came the other way and just thought, sod it, I'm just going to eat whatever I want. I think now in hindsight, looking back, if I'd have followed a good structure and still allowed myself full permission to eat, but instead thought of my days as like, right, okay, I'm having my breakfast, I'm having my lunch, and I'm having my dinner, and in between between that I'm having snacks as well, and making sure that those meals are filling and satisfying, but also within those meals I'm having things like protein, I'm having things like carbs, I'm having things like fats, fibre. And for an example of this would be eggs and avocado on toast, or a bagel with some spinach. And then after that you're having a bowl of oats with peanut butter and banana. Peanut butter for me was a big craving, and I'd not allowed myself for that for years. Looking back now, having that structure in place would have been really useful, because for me it got to a point where some days I was eating peanut butter out of the jar, and in my mind I was like, well, I am allowed to do this, I'm healing. At the same time, eating peanut butter out of the jar is not feeling good either, because obviously that is a lot of fat all in one go, and I was quite aware of that at the same time, and it felt disorganized and not true to how I wanted to feel. Yes, I wanted to be free from food, the food noise and all of the things, but at the same time I didn't want to feel unhealthy, and I was obviously still aware of things like cholesterol and blood sugars and things like that. So if you are going through extreme hunger right now and you're thinking like, I just feel like I could just eat chocolate all day and every day, I'd say firstly, like, zoom out for a second and ask yourself, are you having structured meals throughout the day? Are you actually sitting down and having a breakfast, a lunch and a dinner? And what are you having during those meal times? Are you making sure that they are feeling full and satisfying? So things like protein, for example, adding things like protein to our meals, that is going to help us to feel more satiated, but we're also having other things on top of that. We're having carbohydrates, we're having fats, we're also having fibre. And then in between those main meals, as and when you want to work through certain fear foods, trigger foods, whatever that looks like. So for me, for example, I had a huge trigger and fear around peanut butter, chocolate was a big one, and I did want to get to a point where those foods didn't have this like strong pull around. But like I said, I kind of went through it the wrong way, because personally for me, I just thought, right, okay, I'm just going to eat as much of it as I physically want because I've been so deprived from it, but at the same time that didn't feel good. And also I wasn't actually filling and satisfying my body, so my body was still hungry even after having things like a jar of peanut butter or half a jar of peanut butter, because I wasn't providing my body with the nutrients and macronutrients that my body needed. So we need to understand this, that although we are going through extreme hunger and we're going all in, we do still need to provide our body with good nutrients and macronutrients, things like protein, carbs and fats. If we are providing each meal with a good balance of all of those macronutrients, body's going to start feeling more full, more satisfied, and it's going to help regulate some of those hunger hormones that have been heightened. If you go down the path of like what I did, for example, where I literally just lived off chocolate and granola and all of these high sugar foods for each meal, I wasn't really prioritizing things like protein and fiber and stuff like that. So I would eat these foods and then literally be craving more straight after, so it felt like I was just non-stop, but at the same time I still had all of these cravings for more food. And I truly think that looking back now, it was because my meals were not structured. I wasn't following structure. I was kind of just eating whenever I wanted to. I was eating whenever I felt hungry, and of course it felt like I was constantly eating because I was having these foods that weren't truly filling and satisfying. So it felt like I was just constantly hungry, constantly eating, and also constantly spending money on food. So if this does sound like you and you are feeling like, oh my god, I just feel like now I'm addicted to sugar and I'm just can't stop myself from eating sugar, definitely look at your kind of day-to-day routine and what does that look like. Are you having a breakfast, and what's in that breakfast? Are you having things that are filling and satisfying as well, things like protein and fibre, and then also with your lunches as well? And then in between that, allow yourself the snacks, allow yourself in between that as well, have the things that you have been craving. So if it's a chocolate bar, for example, you could have a chocolate bar with a portion of Greek yogurt with some fruit on top or something like that, and they know, yeah, yes, okay, I've got my lunch after this, or I've got my dinner. So constantly feeding your body. And then eventually what starts to happen is your hunger and appetite and craving start to regulate, and hunger hormones, leptin and ghrelin, start to calm down, which starts to calm down all of those intense cravings. But the truth is, in order to get to that point, we really need to make sure that we are fueling our bodies properly and in a balanced way, that our bodies feel satisfied and balanced. And this, like I said, is what I wish in hindsight I'd have done. But like I said, I really just got to a point where I was so sick and tired of following any kind of rule when it came to food. So I just gave myself full permission to do whatever the hell I wanted. And it did obviously get to a point where I was able to regulate my hunger and my appetite, but for me, it took probably longer than what I would have liked, and definitely didn't make me feel good at times, because like I said, most of my meals were coming from things like sugar. So I was very aware that I wasn't feeling good, I wasn't feeling energized, and I do think that those things are important. So I think if you are at that point where it does feel very chaotic at the moment and you feel like you're just living off sugar, then this could just be that we just need to restructure your meals slightly and look at the way that you're eating, how you're behaving with food. Work on absolutely incorporating things like your trigger foods, your fear foods, but in a more structured way. Like I said, so you could have chocolate if you wanted, you could have the things like the chocolate or the peanut butter, but bring along other elements to it, things that are going to help stabilize your blood sugar, also making sure that you're already well fed beforehand. Of course, I'm just sharing my insights on what's worked for me and worked for other clients as well. I truly believe that once you do commit to the all-in process and you go down this path and you do start understanding how your body works and you're feeding your body properly, extreme hunger, the mental hunger, will start to die down, and you'll get to a point where it does just become normal again. But in order to do that, we have to start in our bodies properly. We have to away from all of that mental restriction, all of the physical restriction. Want guidance for that, support? I will link all my details down in the description box below. This is what I help clients do. I do also offer some free food habit assessments, so I will link down in the description box below as well. So if you want a little bit more support and more insight on your own relationship with food, definitely check that out in the description box below. And with that being said, I will see you in the next video.